In the last video, I briefly mentioned adding repositories on a Debian-based distribution like this one, for example. And I talked about not using the sources file. What I mean by that is this one, etc app sources list. So if you're adding a new source, rather than adding it to that file right there, a better practice is to use sources.d. And I just wanted to real quickly show you how that works too. So essentially what you do is go into etc apt sources.list.d, and in there it's basically just a bunch of .list files. Doesn't matter what you call them, but let's say you wanted to add a new source for Redshift. I don't think you need a separate source for that, but it's a poorly chosen example. It'll do for now. So let's say you had this. So if we were to like look at the raspi.list, this is stuff that would normally go into the sources.list, right? Well, let's say you wanted to add one for Redshift. I'm just going to copy this for later reference. Rather than doing it in sources list, adding a new line in there, a better way to do it would be to create a file called, like, whatever you want to call it, .list. I want to paste this in there for reference. And let's say that the repository for Redshift was, I don't know, redshift.raspberrypi.org. Poorly chosen example, but you get the idea. Insert your new repository here. Then you just save this out. And I just don't have permission to save it. So maybe I can go like this. That still doesn't work. You get the idea. You just create a .list file. And then when you use apt update or apt get update, then it'll look through that .list file as well as the sources.list in general. And the reason why this is almost considered a better practice is organization. Just a nice way to keep track of all your sources. You can label them with these files right there. And if you run into problems because you have so many different repositories, you can disable one at a time very easily because they're in these individual files. So rather than convoluting your sources.list file with like a million different things, use that sources.list.d and create .list files for each individual repository that you add. So if you've been wondering like how to do sources.d, that's the story. So I thought I'd share that real quick. So that's how it would be done. So if you have a bunch of repositories on a Debian-based distribution, such as Raspberry Pi OS, try to use this system rather than a typical sources.list and just tossing everything in there. Because if you have a lot of repositories, you're going to run into conflicts between them. And just organizing things in this way will make it easier to deal with that, most likely. And just organize everything in general. Anyway, ramble over with that.